Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents AI Wars by Ross Buzzell. Narrated by Todd Mclaren. 1. Readjustment. Glass flew in all directions, accompanied by a splash of water. Lance stepped to the side as quickly as he could to prevent the shards from bouncing back at him. Shooting a stern look at Dexter, the captain raised an eyebrow. "Get yourself together, soldier," he snapped as he pointed at the giant. "Are you kidding me?" Dexter shouted. "I'm not," Lance replied, as he crossed his arms over his chest. "I'm this Dex," Matthias said as he stood up from the S4 Officers Club table. "I can't agree with this order." "I like it just as much as you guys do," Lance said. "And even though it wasn't us directly, humans are still responsible for a diplomat's death, and the killer is yet to be brought to justice." "What? 200 Galileo died in that explosion, tops?" Dexter asked as he stepped toward Lance, knocking one of the tables to the side. "He's responsible for over 100,000 dead humans. He killed Michael!" Anger flared within Lance. Gritting his teeth, he stepped toward Dexter, uncrossed his arms, and formed a fist, clenching his fingers tightly. "You don't think I know that?" Lance snarled from behind gritted teeth. "You don't think I see his face every time I close my eyes? Feel the blast wave of that torpedo as it tears through my armor every time I dream? I'm well aware of what Kolar's done. But humanity is a tiny fish in an ocean full of sharks. One misstep and they devour us whole." "Sorry, big guy, but Lance is right," Justin chimed in from the back corner of the room. "Kolar led a fraction of the Galileo forces, and they had enough firepower to wipe out humanity, or at least put us back to the Stone Age. It doesn't matter if we don't like having that homicidal maniac strapped to our sides moving forward." Justin slid out of his seat and made his way across the empty room. "What matters is, we don't tick off the sharks enough that they decide to turn their teeth our way," Justin added, as he stopped several feet away from them. "There are some things we have to put our pride aside for. If this makes peace with the Galileo, then it's something we have to do, like it or not," Lance said, in a low, stern voice. Dexter clenched his jaw as waves of anger twitched across his face. Taking a deep breath, he shook his head and stormed out of the room, kicking a chair as he did. Matthias followed closely behind, slamming his chair into the table as he slid it back in place. "Thanks for backing me," Lance said softly. His eyes locked on the door as it slid shut. "For the record, I don't like it either," Justin confessed. "But orders are orders." "If it were up to me, I'd put a bullet in his head and be done with it too," Lance muttered, as he grabbed the bridge of his nose and closed his eyes. A dull throbbing formed just behind his right eye. "But yes, orders are orders. And since I was unfortunate enough to be selected as Uktaha, he's stuck with me." "Have you told Stephanie yet?" Justin asked. "Yep." She just grunted and shrugged while elbow-deep in some new project she's working on, Lance explained, as he lowered his hand. "I have expected her to kick in my door and start yelling at me when she's no longer distracted, and actually remembers what I told her." "What about the investigation on the Galileo attack?" Justin probed, as he itched under his jaw. Lance sighed. Shaking his head, he made his way to the door. It slid open. Justin followed as he stepped out onto the Martian surface. "I keep checking periodically, but all I get is the official line," Lance explained, as he watched a transport truck pass. "It's still an open investigation, and they aren't able to discuss any details. It's been years, and they've gotten nowhere." Lance pointed toward the north side of the base and started walking. Justin followed closely behind.
I mean, we all know who's responsible,
Justin said as he glanced at the hangars to their right.
It's the Velas.
Totally, Lance agreed with a nod, saluting a CO that passed them. And I'm positive that Ingrid is the one who delivered at least half of the explosive.
Then what's the problem?
Justin asked.
Just tell that to the authorities, and I'm sure they'll be able to track her down.
There's two, actually, Lance said, holding up two fingers as they approached the dig site's elevators. One, I've told them about Ingrid, and they can't find her. And two, there's no patent, no design, no nothing in either military or private sector that I could find that is a two-part explosive that can be injected into different targets and have it go off when they get into close enough proximity.
I can have Stephanie do some investigating if you'd like,
Justin said as he hit the down button on the elevator.
I'm sure with her technical skills she can get past any hidden firewalls that might be stopping the actual investigation.
Aside from the fact that it's highly illegal to do that. If she gets caught, she'll be dishonorably discharged, Lance said with a shake of his head. Any evidence obtained illegally won't stick. And we need to have it stick. The elevator dinged as the doors slid open. Lance stepped in. Justin remained outside.
Why are you going down there?
Justin asked, a puzzled expression overtaking his features. Val had something she wanted to give me, but couldn't because of Kolar's interruption, Lance said as he held the door open. You coming?
Nope,
Justin said, shaking his head.
I'm meant to be in the skies, not underground. Have fun down there.
Always do, Lance replied, before letting the doors close and pressing the down button inside. The lift dropped rapidly. Lance grabbed the bars on the inside of the box to keep himself steady. Any faster and he would have lost his footing. Butterflies fluttered in his stomach as he looked around the elevator. His ears perked up, listening for any odd sounds. Nothing out of the ordinary. As the contraption slowed, Lance planted his feet. His stomach dropped, causing him to let out a groan, straightening himself up. The doors dinged and opened at the foot of the large, underground sphere. A toolbox sat on the ground in front of Lance. Yellow caution holographic lights formed a cross at mid-chest height, and two men stood several feet back, startled at his arrival. One held a datapad, the other a wrench. "What are you doing?" the man with the datapad asked. "This thing has been having calibration issues. Why would you ride it?"
"Yeah, the thing slammed the box right into the ground last time it was used," the wrench-wielding worker added. "Luckily it was only holding tools, but still."
"Well then," Lance said as he cracked a sarcastic smile and stepped over the toolbox and through the caution lights. "Might I suggest one of you go up there and put an out-of-order sign on the door so no one else uses it?" Both workers looked at each other. Their features tightened as anger spread across their faces.
"Carl!"
they both screamed in unison. As both men stormed off to look for their coworker, the man with his datapad pressed a few buttons. The elevator's lights shut off, and the doors slid shut about halfway. "You all couldn't have done that earlier?" Lance muttered to himself as he headed toward the sphere. The city had changed since he'd been here last. They'd been busy. Rock and dust were cleared away from the ruins, leaving well-preserved remains of the advanced civilization that once called this planet home. Metal buildings sported hardly any rust. The streets were paved with what looked like asphalt, but felt like metal underfoot. "Prepare for decontamination," a robotic voice rang as Lance approached the sphere's entrance. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes as he walked under a series of metal frames. They let out a hiss as the upgraded decontamination suite sent puffs of sterilizing clouds over him and his armor. The buzz of automatic doors opening and then closing behind him, accompanied with a lack of blasted air in his face, caused Lance to open his eyes once more. Nothing had changed inside since the last time he was here. Still a sterile room of white walls and floors. Lance walked past several people working in clean suits, using scanners to inspect the walls. He noticed they tossed him a dirty look or two, likely due to him wearing battle armor instead of a sterile suit. The space-aged Rosetta Stone, or SARS for short, was still being inspected by a half-dozen people all the way up its height. One of them looked down from their hovering platform and pointed toward the back of the room.
"She's in the next chamber,"
the scientist shouted down. Lance gave the woman a thumbs up before following where she'd pointed. Near the back of the room, he came across another hallway. Delving deeper into the sphere than he'd been before, the narrow corridor spat him out in a large room that was lined with shelves from floor to ceiling. Shelves were also situated in rows around the room. Dozens of men and women inspected what looked like a digital library. Several hundred feet away, on the part of the back wall, Lance could see what looked like workbenches. Lance jogged through the eerily silent room. His bootfalls echoed with each step. He felt the glare of dozens of eyes turn in his direction, as if he were in a library, and just started screaming. As he reached the back wall, he slowed to a stop. "It's actually really fascinating," Stephanie exclaimed from one of the workbenches. "Everything here was designed to be simple, elegant even. Almost like it was meant to be found by a technologically inferior race," Valdivia added from behind her sterile suit. "I've been saying that this whole time." "Well, it should work now that we've calibrated the magnetic field generator," Stephanie said as she looked up and waved at Lance. "But it won't be able to be used for extended periods of time. There's just not enough juice to sustain it." "I don't think it's meant to be used for a long time," Val replied. "But do you think he'll like it?" "Ask him," Stephanie said as she stepped back from the bench. "Sir?" "You gonna throw a cup at me, too?" Lance asked as he raised an eyebrow.
"No, sir," Stephanie replied. "I've thought about it. I don't like it, but I understand it. So long as he stays in cuffs at all times."
"Any time he's not in a cell," Lance said with a nod.
"Good. Now I need to get these decrypted blueprints to our R&D division. We can increase polarization of our ship's hulls for better armoring, and there are even a few more interesting ship designs that may prove useful," Stephanie said, while holding up a mobile databank. "The knowledge in this place is an engineer's dream."
"Glad you're enjoying yourself," Lance mused, as Stephanie headed out of the library and he approached Valdivia.
"I have a question for you,"
Valdivia said, as she fiddled with an odd metallic band that sported several servos and attachments that looked like it would clip perfectly into a multi-tool.
"I thought the translators we brought were coded for all human language. I think mine is malfunctioning because I'm having trouble understanding several people."
"I'm sure Stephanie could run a diagnostic for you without any problems," Lance said, as he glanced back to his new teammate while she walked away.
"She did. There wasn't anything wrong with it,"
Valdivia replied, before pointing at two men kneeling at a nearby shelf with scanners. "Aye onte one," one said with a shrug. "Ishes einduvke othe, orme yudke," the other replied. "Anke etke udge, ukle, at urhe, aisfe." "Uhe are uye akingte aboute?" Lance asked, as he crossed his arms and made his way over to them. "Oh, no one, sir," the first said, as both men shot to their feet and saluted him. "I didn't think so," Lance replied, as he cocked an eyebrow before nodding to the side. "Go exchange jobs with someone in a different part of this structure."
"Yes, sir,"
the second replied, before they quickly marched away.
"You know that language?"
Valdivia asked as she picked up the device and stepped towards him. "It's Pig Latin," Lance mused, facing the Jarog. "Your translator's not broken. It's just not uploaded with a made-up language."
"If it's made up, then how do so many people know it?"
Val asked, tilting her head to one side in curiosity, her visor obstructing her features from the soldier. "In the English language, if a word starts with a consonant, you move the consonant to the end of the word and add an A at the end," Lance explained. "If it starts with a vowel, so A-E-I-O-U and Y, then you keep the vowel at the beginning, but still add the A at the end. I'll bet you just about anything that the reason your translator isn't working on it is because the satellite with the information about Earth that the Galileo discovered wasn't loaded with the language because it was made up, and the only people who spoke it for childish fun."
Who would have thought such a childish thing could bypass such an advancement in communication?
Valdivia mused, before extending her project to him.
"I heard you broke your multi-tool blade on Carpathia. Since I doubt you've had time to get it replaced, I've been working with Cadence and Stephanie to make you this. It's based off the blueprints we found in here, and Steph helped me change the design enough to fit in your multi-tool."
Lance extended his arm. Valdivia slid the device onto his forearm. Its servo sat near his wrist with a thin piece of metal that looked like it'd flip outward once activated. His multi-tool let out a hum for several seconds as 4 little lights filled up on the framed addition to his suit.
"Go ahead,"
Valdivia said as she stepped away and laced her hands behind her back.
"Give it a try."
"And what is this exactly?" Lance asked, as he looked at Val with curiosity in his voice.
"I call it the standard tactical arm-mounted bayonet for solitary transitioning of aggressive bystanders,"
Valdivia replied. "That's a terrible name," Lance chuckled, as he continued to inspect the device. "And it doesn't tell me what it is at all."
"Yes, it does,"
Valdivia argued as she pointed to it.
"It's the stab.
Her voice brimmed with pride. Even though he couldn't see her face, he could hear her smile. With a sigh to stifle his laughter, Lance planted his feet and took a deep breath as he prepared to test out his new suit addition. 2. Stab. Valdivia took several more steps back. Lance noticed she lifted her hands to cover most of her visor. "You don't seem very confident in its safety," Lance said as he hesitated.
"We haven't had a chance to really test it yet,"
Valdivia confessed.
"The individual pieces work fine, and the numbers indicate they'll work fine when combined with a multi-tool. At least that's what Stephanie says."
She's sharp," Lance said with a shrug. Clenching his fist twice, his multi-tool lit up like a Christmas tree. A deep hum trembled through the device as the holographic projectors on the outside of his arm glowed brighter than he'd ever seen. The servo activated, kicking the thin piece of metal that folded back to flip forward. A wave of heat hit Lance's face, causing him to hold the new weapon further away from himself. Lights ran down the inside of the extended metal as a blade of holographic plasma flared into existence. Adrenaline surged through his body. His heart rate spiked in excitement at the power of his new weapon. Lance turned his head away from the bright, light weapon as its heat intensified. The blade tip extended 6 inches past the projector's tip. Its hum rattled his armor before vanishing just as quickly as it appeared, with the servo activating, retracting everything back to its standby setting. The multi-tool's energy reader showed 10% less than before he activated the weapon. What's that smell?" one of the nearby workers complained as they looked around. Lance sniffed. The faintest whiff of singed hair lingered in the air. Taking off his glove, he ran his fingers over the right side of his head. Despite having a buzz cut, he felt small beads of burned hair fall off the side of his head. He turned to Valdivia and cracked a smile. "This is probably the most terrifyingly amazing weapon I've ever used," he exclaimed, as he ran a quick calibration test on his multi-tool. Its functions were unaffected. "It drains the multi-tool's power like no other, but it's fantastic."
"Stephanie did say she'd be working on it,"
Valdivia explained as she looked around the library.
"I'm hoping we find schematics for this civilization's power source. It'll make the drain on your system much less significant."
"As well as being able to get us on the same playing field as the rest of the galaxy," Lance said, while looking around the impressive room. "Any civilization advanced enough for this is one to learn from."
"Speaking of learning from,"
Valdivia said as she stepped toward Lance. Her hands moved to behind her back as her shoulders rolled forward.
"I heard you're heading to Alcazar space. I was wondering if I could go with you. I found maps that may lead to other potential colonies of this species. I'd like to take a team and come with you to find out more about this race."
"I would love for you to come with us, but it's not up to me," Lance said, as he put his glove back on, locking it in place. "You'll have to put in a request with Colonel Cadence for the team, and a second to be able to travel on military transport."
"I'll get right on that, then,"
Valdivia exclaimed, as she gave a little hop in excitement before turning and running for the sphere's exit.
"I'll let you know what she says."
Valdivia's voice echoed as she shouted back. Lance looked at his multi-tool's new extension and gave it a little tap. "Let's hope you don't cause an explosion," he said softly, before opening a line of communication to Folter. "Sir, I've got a new weapon whose blueprints were discovered in the ruins Valdivia's working in. Stephanie helped build a prototype, and I think it's worth a run in the training ground."
"Did you put in a requisition, Bright Eyes?"
Folter asked, his voice coming through the multi-tool just as stern as if he were present in person. "Not yet, sir. I will," Lance replied as he exited the library and entered the SARS chamber. "It'll be submitted before I get back to the surface."
"As soon as it comes through, I'll get started on setting up the training ground then,"
Folter replied, before he hung up. Exiting the sphere, Lance turned his attention to the requisition request folder in his multi-tool. Selecting the Training Grounds file, he filled in the request asking for moving targets and hand-to-hand combat to emulate a living being. 4 people now worked on the elevator he arrived in. Passing them, he made his way to the next available moving box. Summoning it, he opened a communication line to his team. "Raffin Squad, please report to the training ground," Lance said, as the next lift arrived and opened its doors. He stepped inside. "I've got a new toy made by Val and Stephanie that I want to try out."
"Copy that,"
Justin said over the roar of an engine in the background.
"On our way,"
Dexter replied. Lance heard Matthias groan.
"Is it as fun as it looks?"
Stephanie asked. "And even more dangerous," Lance replied after pressing the up button, causing it to move toward the surface. "I turned it on for a split second and it singed the hairs on the right side of my head."
"It is a laser-based plasma blade that's held in with a weak magnetic field," Stephanie explained. "Of course it's going to be hot."
The elevator reached ground level. Its doors opened. Lance stepped out as he headed toward the S4 building next to the hangars. "What if the weak magnetic field breaks?" Lance asked as he started to jog.
"That's why it's designed for single strikes, not sustained combat," Stephanie explained over the radio. "You have a very nice knife for that." A ping drew Lance's attention back to his multi-tool as troops and trucks going from one place to another passed him. He looked down to see that his request had already been approved. "Requisition form approved. I'll be there in 2 minutes," Lance said, as the doors to the S4 building slid open for him.
"You had to fill out a rec form to use the training ground?"
Dexter asked. "Where's their lapdogs?" Matthias's voice came through Dexter's radio link. It sounded like he was several feet away.
Are you surprised that they tightened our collars after nuking a planet, destroying a colony's infrastructure, allowing a WASP to be shut down, losing valuable resources and leadership?
When you put it that way, I'm surprised we haven't been discharged,
Justin replied. Lance entered a stairwell and descended below ground. Passing 6 stories of solid concrete, he reached a door and swung it open. A massive room of smooth pavement and metal the size of a football field sat before him. Smooth ramps transitioned to higher levels and lower levels to simulate terrain. Steel barriers, large enough for 2 people to use for cover, peppered the room. There was 40 feet of clearance above him where massive lights filled the room in a pale filter. Near the top, behind very thick glass, was a viewing booth. Inside, Lance saw his team, Folter, and Cadence, waiting to observe the new weapon. Taking a deep breath, the soldier grabbed his helmet off his hip and put it on his head before locking it in place. His HUD flickered to life and quickly calibrated. "Ready to conduct stabbing test 1, Lance called out, as he waved his hand to his onlookers.
"Initiating dummy protocol,"
Folter replied, as the noticeable orange light of a multi-tool glowed from his arm. A square in the ground slid back as a training dummy was lifted up from a small elevator. It was dressed in fatigues and appeared like a crash test dummy, with more realistic fleshy features. "Forget the Reeves. If these things gained true AI and came to life, they'd be absolutely terrifying," Lance said with a chuckle, as he approached the weapons test dummy.
That's why they're not made to move. Just test the effects of weapons on a human body,
Cadence replied.
Through all the mistakes humanity has made, at least we learned something from horror movies,
Justin chimed in.
Now give it a stab.
Patience, buddy, Lance said, as he shook his arm, butterflies fluttering in his stomach. We don't know how the test dummy will react to the weapon. Stab, stab, stab test 1 in 3, 2.
Wait a second.
Dexter's voice rang through the radio with laughter.
That thing's called a stab stab?
Bring the acronym up with Val. She's the one who rediscovered it, so she got to name it, Lance said, before motioning to the dummy. Can I test it now, or do you want to giggle some more? He looked up to the viewing station to see Dexter leaning forward with one hand on the glass and the other on his stomach. His face was bright red as his body heaved with laughter. Justin leaned over and shut off the communication channel on the giant's multi-tool.
Go ahead and test it,
Folter said with a nod.
Yeah, he's stuck in a giggle loop. I don't think he'll be out of it any time soon,
Justin chimed in. Lance turned his attention back to the dummy. Its featureless face stared at him. An unsettled feeling crept into him. It wouldn't be so creepy if the thing were plastic or metal. It was the fleshy texture of the testing equipment that made his imagination run wild, that it had turned its head to him.
Okay, you gotta die,
Lance muttered with a headshake. Creepy little mannequin. He placed his left hand on the dummy's chest. Planting his feet, he positioned his body for the stabbing punch. Initiating stabbing test in 3, 2, 1, Lance called out. Taking a deep breath, he pumped his fist twice as he thrust it forward. The orange flash of light from the lasers of the multi-tool and his new weapon danced over his visor and illuminated the dummy. A heat warning flashed on his HUD as Lance dropped his left hand to clear it from where he aimed. The orange blade sliced through the uniform like a hot knife through butter. The fatigues around the stabbing site burst into flames as the plasma blade sank itself into the dummy's chest, as if it weren't even there. Instantly, steam erupted from the hole in the dummy's chest. Its force pushed Lance's arm back as the blade shut off and the projector folded back up. A burst of adrenaline coursed through Lance. His heart skipped a beat at the violence of the test's reaction. Quickly, He patted down the uniform, putting out the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?